Well, this technology, we really just kind of came out of stealth mode about maybe 18 months, 24 months ago. We had been working, started with a DOE-funded R&D project under the fossil energy program, and invented a technology, and a company found us, and we stayed in stealth mode for, oh gosh, about 10 years. The rule was we don't even tell people who we're working with. But so now I can tell you we're working with MEG Energy, and I'll give you a little bit about them and talk a little bit about the technology, how it improves carbon footprint for oil, other profit and technology benefits as well. And then give you a little summary as to where we are. So Frank put some information in there. He's now allowed to start going out and talk, so he's got a little bit of background about who we are and who MEG is, a little bit about the Alberta oil sands for anybody, for people who aren't as familiar as he is. Talk about some of the resource recovery, transportation, some of the current practices and issues, and those challenges that are opportunities for us that we've put some work into to make things better. We're really focusing on let's call it as partial upgrading, partial field upgrading, rather than a conventional thinking of full upgrading. I'll talk a little bit about that, and the development and how we're adding value. So we had some slides. So for those who have been in Laramie, Western Research Institute started as a Bureau of Mines back in 1924, and then evolved from doing petroleum research, doing work on oil, shale, coal, oil sands, and in the 1970s became part of the U.S. Department of Energy. And in 1983, when the government was looking at trying to find ways to cut the budget, they defederalized a couple of energy technology centers around the country, including the one in Laramie, and we were established as a nonprofit research and technology development entity, closely affiliated with the university to help the research and education mission, but also to help industries, recruit new industries, help start up new companies, and help existing companies compete and adapt as the marketplace changes with addressing new technology research. So we try to look 10, 20 years ahead, see what the mega trends are, what are the big issues, and start working on those. As you heard earlier today, it could take 4 decades before you actually start getting something into practice. So having a crystal ball. Frank gave some pictures of the history, advanced energy coal systems, our environmental technologies group for emissions capture, remediation, cleaning up contaminated soils and waters, highway materials, actually on asphalt chemistry. The heavy oil work really relates well to asphalt chemistry, and so we have the world leading experts on asphalt chemistry and how the asphalt chemistry differs from one crude oil source to another. And as we recycle more asphalts, how does that affect performance in the physical property sense? And so for the first time, we're linking how chemistry equates to physical properties. That has never been done before. Asphalt was so inexpensive, $30, $40 a ton. Now it's $600, $800 a ton. There's a financial motivation to do that now. And in the heavy oil bitumen processing, it shows a couple of pictures, 1970 picture, about a 2000 picture. Since 2000, we've added about 5 or 6 more buildings as we did some expansion during the last 8 years. MEG Energy is a real interesting story. Bill McCaffrey, he was working for one of the major oil companies back in the 80s, 90s as a geologist. And so he surveyed and he found out where some of the really good resource spots were, quality and easy to extract. And then in the bust cycle, and all the companies up there started moving out and selling, he purchased and acquired what he thought were some of the best resource locations up there and started building this company around there. Founded in 1999, became publicly traded in the stock market in 2010. So on a Canadian dollar basis, they're about a $6 billion market cap industry today as a result of the work they've done. But they're also going partially vertically. You know, they'll have pipelines for the crude oil, for the diluent, rail, tanks for transload facilities and storage and moving the product by rail as well. And they've built a Stonefell terminal, which can handle 900,000 barrels per day. They have a pipeline that they have half ownership in, and there's some pictures of the folks there. So Frank wanted to give a quick little image of what oil sands are. So the center part of each one of these particles is sand, And then there's a water envelope, it's water and clay, and then the oil is actually all around the outside. So the trick is to get rid of the water, get rid of the oil, get rid of the clay, and just have the oil that you can take to market. And that's a picture of what it looks like. So if you've done home improvements, fixed your driveway, and you've got that sandy asphalt repair patch kit, it kind of looks like that. So that's a picture of what it looks like. Very thick, very heavy, doesn't flow in a pipe very well. So the trick is to convert that into something that will flow in a pipeline that you can take it to the market. Just give you geographically locations where this is operating. It's north of Edmonton and the Athabasca oil sands and some of those other areas up there. Some of the most northern part is actually right along the river, and that oil is just constantly it's just falling into the river. So the mining that's actually going on up there and the stuff that's accessible right at the surface is actually helping clean the water as well by preventing it from going into the water. So it's not always a negative environmental story, as you might have heard. And just move along. So right now there's estimated to be upwards of 2.5 trillion barrels in place, with about 170 billion barrels recovered with the conventional, with the technology that state of the art that it's out there today. So that places it third only to Saudi Arabia and Venezuela. So I've heard the Governor Meade speak between Mexico, the U.S., and these energy resources and the hydro resources in Canada, that he really thinks it's viable to consider that North America can become energy independent. And this shows just a little breakdown that the mining process, so surface mining, is about 20% of the resource, and in situ, which I'll show you some pictures of that, is about 80% and growing. And let's see, what has he got here? So right now, Alberta is the 5th largest global producer of oil, and 33% of U.S. oil imports now come from just Alberta province alone. So for Wyoming, one thing I found with a foreign trade mission with the Governor Meade up there is about a third of Wyoming's trade is with Canada. And you can imagine a majority of it actually is with Alberta province. Given the current situation with the price of oil, Frank thought it would be good to show some of these trends in oil prices. The U.S. Canadian oil prices, we complain about West Texas Intermediate compared to Brent. Well, Canadian crude oil compared to West Texas Intermediate has the challenge too. But one of the things we've seen with the drop in oil prices, it hasn't affected the Canadian Select. Now, they established their crude spec, WCS, to meet pipeline specs. Because the majority of refineries in the U.S. are configured to handle heavy oil, that the price decline on the Canadian Select crude oil hasn't dropped as fast as West Texas Intermediate, which tends to be a lighter, sweeter oil for which the refineries aren't designed and configured to handle as well. They could be with retrofits, so forth. So that's actually helped keep the selling price of Canadian oil up compared to WTI. So over 2014, towards the end of 2014, you've seen the price differential actually improve more favorably for Canada. And I think part of that might be the fact that the U.S. dollar has gotten stronger in the last 6 to 8 months. About a year ago or more, the Canadian dollar was worth more than the U.S. dollar. Right now, the U.S. dollar is, about $1.25 over a Canadian dollar just in the last 6 to 8 months due to the currency exchange differences. So I think some of the challenges we're seeing in the oil sector is also relative to foreign currency exchanges. So the big competitor for the Canadian oil sands really is the heavy crudes that we import from Mexico and Venezuela, not U.S. oil shale oil production, because that's lighter, sweeter. It's not of the constituent and composition that the refineries in the U.S. are designed to handle. This is showing some of the pipeline networks. Just want to mention, I think this one, how do I do that? Okay. The Express pipeline here coming down. There's Edmonton, Hardisty. This is one of the major routes that comes down through Wyoming. I'll talk a little bit later. Some of the transload facilities that Wyoming is building is actually helping to move oil into the U.S. and expanding the capacity to deliver more oil through that particular pipe, thanks to some of the infrastructure that's been going on in the state. U.S. demand, whoops, what happened there? Is increasing. That express pipeline and the transload facility is about $60 million project planned and under construction in Casper, Wyoming. It's going to help significantly increase the capacity through that express pipeline to bring more Canadian oil into the U.S. market. So we hear a lot about Keystone. There's a lot of projects that are underway going to still bring things into market, maybe just not on the center of the radar screen for the environmentalist and public policy debates in Washington, D.C. Still a lot going on, a lot coming in by rail, a lot coming in by barges on the rivers. Canada is building pipelines to their west and east coasts, an event that the barriers to bringing it into the U.S. markets doesn't get resolved, so they'll take it to Asia and take it to Europe. So this is a cartoon illustration for steam-assisted gravity drainage. So rather than surface mining, these underground deposits, 2 wells are drilled. The upper well, if you can see it on the red line, is pumped with steam, and that softens that sandy cake substance that you saw, and so that it will flow and be able to be pumped back up the second pipe. And so the steam is produced, at least for MEG's perspective, they've been using combined heat and power. They have their own natural gas power generation system, and they use the exhaust heat from that to produce the steam that they use, and that increases their overall energy efficiency of their operation considerably. They were one of the first developers up there to use that technique. The water and the bitumen are pumped to the surface. SOR is steam to oil ratio. In the industry, the norm is about 3. So with MEG Energies, they're typically below 2.5, heading down actually below 2 with some of the efficiencies and other improvements. They're typically around 2.5 when it's a new well that they just built, and then as it gets operational, that water use drops off considerably. They recycle about 90% of their water, and they use no surface water. So they're using water that's already underground, not impacting the surface water for wildlife and other natural habitat purposes. And it has a very small footprint compared to surface mining. And because of what Bill McCaffrey saw when he picked these resources when he first bought them, and these efficient use of combined heat and power for generating steam, they're actually typically neck and neck to be the lowest cost producer up in Alberta sands right now. The word we heard from them is for existing productions, they probably can produce oil and still be net positive for about $30 a barrel. So not every oil company needs $60, $80, $100. Of course, you need that to be able to continue to expand because you need that market capability to do that. This is a picture of their Christina Lake site, just to give you some example with storage tanks, and you can see the power generation here, stacks over here, and so much different than a surface mining operation. And then the pipeline specs, this is what they're dealing with. This is the opportunity. The bitumen, as you saw in that sandy cake mix, its viscosity in center stokes is 166,000. You need to be less than 40,000 to be able to flow in a pipe. So the process technology that they license from us achieves that. So what the conventional approach today is you use what's called a diluent, and you add it in with the oil that's been extracted from that sandy mix. It's usually naphtha, natural gas condensates, and that thins it down so you can achieve that viscosity specification so that you can flow it in a pipeline. Of course, now you got to pay for this condensate, and it has to be extracted at the refinery, so there's an operational cost, an energy efficiency cost, and that diluent's typically returned back, so there's another operational cost. So our technology eliminates the need to have to use this diluent. So the 20 to 50% diluent means in a pipe, you now have about 40 to 50% less oil going to market because that diluent is taking up some of that capacity. So by removing and eliminating the need to use that diluent, now we can deliver more per pipe, per rail car, than they can do today. So you might hear synthetic bitumen, synthetic crude. I'll just keep moving on. I think Lloyd gave me 20 minutes. I think he has a lot more slides for that. So we talked a little bit about that problem. These slides will be available, so I'll just jump ahead as to why we worked on this upgrade or development project. This is a 5 barrel per day plant in Wyoming. We started back in 2000 with the relationship after we had invented this under a DOE fossil energy R&D funded program. And we've been expanding and developing. The team runs this around the clock, 10 days in a row, 12, 15 days in a row, as they mapped out the operational conditions and developed the data so we could engineer a larger demonstration plant. And I'll go through these so you can read them a little bit later. Then we've added some additional skids to this unit. And what we've also added with the University of Wyoming is an intern workforce development program to support the demonstration project. So even though we might have a technology, we can license the technology and the patents and the technical manuals and all that kind of stuff, you still need to develop a workforce to operate and run such a plant. And since this is a novel plant, you can't just hire conventional people already off the street in the industry. So a key component to the commercialization success and movement forward is also in parallel developing the skilled workforce, and we're fortunate to have the university right in Laramie. And we've planned is we've done 12 students. The plan is to run 50 interns through for this demonstration plant, and then ramp up for another 200 plus as we go to a commercial plant. So this is a schematic of the process. So probably won't go into it too much in the interest of time, but essentially we have this was what comes in. Diluted bitumen is what comes in currently from the field. Remove the diluent, then that bitumen gets processed through some conversion process, so thermal energy and other reactions. We take the light stuff that comes in, and then we take the heavy stuff, and from some solvent, we take the asphalts out that can be recovered, and the asphaltenes can be used as coke or other energy or other co-products, and we blend that together, and we get about a 90% net high-Q product out of the input that came into the system. And that's a little significant. I'll tell you a little bit about that later. This is some of the specs. So if you're familiar with oil, microcarbon ratio, this is the acidic ratio. The acids are going to be below a certain amount to avoid corrosion in the pipes in your system. Some of the heavy metals, nickel, vanadium, you get those items out for refining and flow purposes. So the microcarbon ratio and the using asphalts. I'll move a little forward, keep it going. So here's an example of the composition. The residual is reduced from 58 to 18% of the product. So if you're starting with the bitumen, you get the big tank on the left. You're dealing with the vacuum resid. And there's a little bit of naphtha, kerosene and diesel, and some gassy oils. So through the high Q process, this is what we wind up with. About 90% is good quality saleable product. And I'll talk a little bit about how we compare this to the conventional approach with delayed coking. This is what you produce, so you get less net product out as a result. And I'll just kind of keep moving forward. So 2 types of refineries, if you're familiar with cracking and coking, is based on the feedstock type, light or heavy crude. So with the refinery margins are based on the floats of these prices. So Frank put quite a few charts in here for the market business folks, and Lloyd, how much more time do I have? 5 minutes. So these will be available. So if you have light crude or synthetic oil, you're looking at a refinery margin of $5 to $6. With this heavy crude, you're looking at a refinery margin of $21 to $23 per barrel margin. So a greater internal rate of return. So that's one of the key motivations for pursuing the heavy oil and this high Q product with the technology that we've had and developed with MEG Energy. This shows kind of comparison, dilbit to coking refinery, and then go through a coking upgrader and cracking. Or if you were to go to the high Q upgrading, this is the process you would get. So higher market value potential, higher profitability for the refineries. So that's what makes it an attractive product to pursue the technology development. This kind of shows what those barrel charts showed. He took out the legend, but really just wants to show you the key point here is on the left. If you just take the dilbit, which is diluted bitumen, these are the products you would get, about 83.5%. With the high Q and then through a refinery, because refineries do fuzzy math like Congress does fuzzy financial budget math too, you actually come out with more than 100%. And that's just because of the nature of refineries. But the key takeaway here, without going into how that's calculated, is you get quite a bit more end saleable product as a result. We were required by some of the Canadian government funding agencies, Sustainable Development Technologies Canada, to actually look at a life cycle analysis for carbon. They were interested, well, this process is 44% lower carbon footprint compared to delayed coking. But when you look at the complete well-to-wheels analysis, what is the net societal impact of having 44% lower carbon footprint in one portion of that entire societal system? And this is the analysis that we did, and they liked it and they funded the project as a result. So if you look at bitumen to a refinery as conventional, bitumen to synthetic or crude oil or sour to refineries, and this is our process. So we see a 4% improvement over these conventional processes overall, measured on an energy basis, and on a miles driven basis, it equates to a 7% improvement. One of the key points I just want to show you here is these big bars, that's the consumption, that's the CO2 footprint from the vehicles that are consuming the fuel. So even though we had a 44% lower footprint on this conversion process over here, and it's a notable drop, what really controls the complete societal impact on climate change or carbon emissions is the transport. So improving efficiency on vehicles is going to help lower this bar, the total of this bar, down even further. We talked about that. Some pictures, the program status. I'll kind of just start wrapping up. I talked a little bit already. The reason we came out of stealth mode is MEG Energy did put their public permit applications for a demonstration plant up in Edmonton. It's 1,500 barrels per day to scale up the technology. It's about a $200 million plant. Kind of interesting anecdote was we got to tour up there with Governor Meade, and I told him at one dinner that we're doing this is risk management. We're doing this demonstration of $200 million before we spend $5–10 billion on a several 100,000 barrel per day commercial plant. I think he kind of took note, and then a couple nights later we had dinner with the folks from MEG Energy, and they said the same thing, and he looked at us and said, "You're going to spend $200 million on risk management?" So that's the kind of order of what we talk about, but this adds another 4 or 5 years into the commercialization process, so to the timelines that Ben and Carl talked about. When you're dealing with a multi-billion dollar commercial plant operation for the first time, you have this demonstration level that's in there that adds $200 to $500 million, that adds 4 to 5 to 6 years worth of time in the commercialization pipeline process that has to be considered when you're dealing with a novel, first-of-a-kind energy process plant. Because there's such huge dollar amounts, investors aren't willing to skip that. $200 million is a minor percentage compared to $5 billion, $10 billion. I think Lloyd's getting ready, so I will wrap up. Our demonstration goals, one of the key things about this, the company's very comfortable with the technology and the chemistry and how it works. One of the key reasons for picking this particular size is it allows us to produce a unit train car load of this product. We can ship it to refineries and get their evaluation, their market assessment, and their feedback on if they would like to see the chemistry of the oil changed or tweaked a little bit. And then we could adjust and make those refinements and then lock that in before the first big commercial plant is designed. So that really, this demonstration plant is largely a market validation and a market refinement adjustment process. So I'll skip up as Lloyd's getting ready to move. All these slides will be available online. It's a lot of things we already talked about, kind of in summary. So I'll just skip through all this. And we were fortunate to have the governor come out and tour our demonstration facility in Laramie with some of the leaders from MEG Energy. So with that, Lloyd, I think you're asking me to wind it up.
Good job, Don. Questions from the board? Questions from the audience? I would encourage you to learn more about Don's and all of his people's work at the WRI. They work on a lot of interesting things that could become reality. Right, Don? Will become.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question? No, I'm just kidding.
So let's give Don a hand. Thank you so much.